This episode is titled A Piece of Scandinavian History. Our guest, Megan Indvik. Megan holds a treasured piece of Scandinavian history as she recounts her grandfather, Reverend Wade Davick's involvement in the sesquicentennial celebration that united 4 Minot Lutheran churches in honoring Norwegian immigration and heritage. Reverend Davick went on to learn the art of woodturning, inspired by Hostfest artisans, and created special pieces for each of his children and grandchildren. Megan's upbringing attending Hostfest forms a backdrop for her deep appreciation for the festival, which she now shares with her own children, providing them a window to the world. Please enjoy this conversation with Megan Indvik.
My name is Megan Indvik. I am the granddaughter of Wade Davick. My mother is Lisa Davick, which is one of Wade's daughters. 3 kids, and she was the only girl. So my involvement with the Hostfest has been, my grandpa has been he was the MC for many years of the Hall of Fame banquet. And so I sometimes tagged along with him to watch him do his thing. He was kind of a hero of mine, and I'm his number 1 fan. And so he always took me with him to do things like that. I know a little bit about my grandpa's history with the Hostfest. He was the Lutheran pastor here at First Lutheran Church for, I want to say 13 years maybe. And he has always had his Norwegian background and heritage as something that was really important to him. He traveled to Norway quite a bit. He just really wanted to know where he came from, and that was very important to him. And so I know it became important to continue on with some of those traditions and to teach future generations about where we came from and about our heritage.
On a personal level, why do you think that's important?
I mean, I think it's important to know where we all came from. And at the end of the day, none of us are from the United States. We're all from somewhere else. And I think it's humbling for us to remember that, and gives us a little bit more grace for some of the issues that face us today too. But I mean, it's just important to keep some of those traditional things alive, because it would be very easy for generations to just move on and not have some of those old traditions move forward. So I know it was very important to him, and I'm thankful that he held it in his heart and that he put a lot of work into moving forward with it. I mean, it even went as far as he wanted to be called Bestefar, because that's grandfather in Norwegian. And so even when he would, well, this one always killed me, especially when I was like younger as a teenager, when he would do his church service for Christmas, like his Christmas Eve church service, he wanted Silent Night sung in Norwegian. Well, that one, I couldn't. That just, I couldn't get on board with that. I couldn't pronounce anything. But the cool part is there were a lot of traditional churchgoers too, and they really cherished that moment and being able to sing Silent Night in the Norwegian language. So pretty neat.
So your grandfather was one of the first group of churches that put this together, that when it was the Fall Heritage Festival, that was all the way back in 1975. What do you know about that? What do you know about your grandfather's involvement?
So, being the pastor of First Lutheran, all of the Lutheran pastors in Minot and pastors from other denominations too, they always did a lot of collaborating. And I know that the Lutheran pastors specifically wanted to preserve the Norwegian heritage and keep it going into future generations. And so I don't know how it started, but what I do have is a letter that my grandma wrote to her mom when she moved from Minneapolis to Bowman, North Dakota. It was quite a culture shock. And small town, she was a brand new pastor's wife, and all of the challenges and new learning opportunities that came along with that. And so she shared those regularly with her mom by writing letters. I happen to have one letter, and it is dated October 1st, 1975, and it talks about the original Hostfest under the previous name. Dear Mom, how about that? A new month. I've just finished my day at the hospital, and I have some time before Sunday school, so thought I'd write. Today was my last Wednesday at the hospital. I'm switching to Mondays. Wednesday was a bad day for Wade as he has staff meeting at 9 and he always had to get Carl off to school and he wanted some time before the meeting to get ready. So I changed. I thought of quitting, but my supervisor said, please don't. Wade has a bad cold in his chest, but as usual, he hasn't called the doctor. He almost did yesterday, but something came up. This weekend, Friday and Saturday, is the Norwegian Heritage Fair that he's been chairman of for 1.5 years. They started plans that long ago. He was on TV last week advertising it and on radio and many articles and pictures in the paper. It is being held at the auditorium. The women's auxiliaries of the 4 ALC churches have been planning it to give people an idea of our Norwegian culture and heritage. The whole thing is to mark the 150th anniversary of the arrival of the first Norwegian immigrants to America. Minot is one of 16 areas in the U.S. designated for an observance of this kind. Dr. Fred Schiotz is the one who called Wade and asked him to be in charge of this mission. On October 19th, a Norwegian worship service is planned with the Bishop of the Church of Norway as the speaker. Back to the fair. There was an import shop where we could buy Norwegian items. We bought a plate. There were booths set up where people were demonstrating rosemalling, weaving, tatting, hardanger, lace making, knitting, spinning, and wood carving. Wade's dad will be demonstrating wood carving today. There were many exhibits. People loaned their Norwegian antiques, things they had from grandparents in Norway, etc. There was a food service booth that served food continually for 2 days. Norwegian sandwiches, sweet soup, rummegraut, all the Norwegian cookies, and lefse. The ladies in the 4 churches really worked on this. Last night was a 2.5-hour program, singing, dancing, choirs, all Norwegian things. Fantastic. Lots of ladies wore their Norwegian costumes and jewelry. Wade is the MC for today's session. And that's all that's said about the Norwegian festival.
That's so fantastic. What a really cool synopsis of a very humble beginning for the Hostfest.
Yeah, and my grandpa went on. So he was the MC all the way up until the Hall of Fame banquet. I think 2011 was his last year, and then they kind of went a different direction and went with a different MC. But my grandpa really loved coming out here because he eventually moved to Winona, Minnesota, and so the Hostfest was his one time of year to come back to Minot and see everyone, see his old parish, and there's a lot of people still here that knew him when he was the pastor here. And so he kind of has a fan following.
A well-earned fan following from what it sounds like, given his contributions over all the years. Now, you said you've got to go with him quite a bit to the Hall of Fame ceremony?
I just went to the Hostfest with him, and he would be interviewed on the radio, and he just kind of wanted to point out a lot of the different things that are soft on his heart as a Norwegian.
What were the things that were soft on his heart?
So the biggest thing was Phil Auden was the wood carver there. And he was always back every year showing off his wood carvings and selling them. But my grandpa got into Norwegian wood carving later in life. His dad was a Norwegian wood carver too. And so my grandpa picked it up, and he had met Phil through the Hostfest, and then eventually ended up taking private lessons from Phil to really learn the trade. And so he did kuba stools for all of his children, and then he did candelabras for all his grandchildren. So we all have original Norwegian carvings that my grandpa worked on himself. And actually, I kind of have a funny story about one of them. So my grandpa made a big wooden chest for me. And on the top, it's got the beautiful Norwegian carving, and then it has my name carved in big Norwegian font on the top. Well, my husband, he told me one day that he was going to go get my name tattooed on his arm. And I'm like, oh, you're silly. Don't do that. That's how isn't that a jinx or something? And so he left for the day. When he came back, he said, I did it. I got your name on my arm. I'm like, no way. He showed me, he had taken a picture of my grandpa's carving, and he had the tattoo artist tattoo my name in his arm using the font and the carving as the picture. Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty cool. That is really cool. Do you have a favorite memory of going to the Hostfest with your grandpa?
So my favorite memory of the Hostfest was my grandpa's final trip to the Hostfest, and I believe that would have been 2010. And truly, it was just kind of standing back and watching him interact with all of the booths and interact with all of the people that he remembered from way back when he first started this program. And then just seeing the intersection of the new generations that were starting to come to the Hostfest and, just passing on those traditions of old to the new generation so that it can live on forever. It was just such a great time to be with him there.
Sounds like a really powerful and touching moment. And I think it's important to hear that. We need that. We want these new generations to appreciate those facts. This is our heritage. This is where we came from. It matters. This sense of community matters. Why do you think those things are important?
I mean, I just think anybody's history is important. Just knowing where you came from, how we got here, and, where we're going. It's important to remember all of our history. And so the new generations need to know where we came from, ultimately. And it's important to me. It's important to my family.
And there's a lot of fun. There is a lot of fun to be had at the Hostfest. I think over time, some people have misassociated that as well, that it's just for old people. It's really not.
No. So, you hear things in town that people think that, the Hostfest is just for the elderly and, for rose mauling and kuba stools and those kinds of things, but it's really not. I mean, there's new music acts that they're bringing in. I went to the band Perry concert one year and that was fabulous. And so I think the more that we expand events and kind of draw in new crowds, they'll start to understand this isn't just, learning about knitting sweaters from the old country. This is truly a festival for everyone, and there's something that everybody can enjoy.
It's a place for all kinds of people who are curious, which I think most of us are curious on some level. The Hostfest is a place where you can go and get those curiosities satisfied.
Well, and it might even spark an interest. So you could be there learning something new and you kind of start to think to yourself, when did my family come to North Dakota and from where? Are we 3 generations in, 4 generations in? And, I hope that it sparks some people to go take a look at some of that and figure out, how long have you been here and where'd you come from? How'd you get here? Why?
Sure. Or like in your grandfather's case, that sparked an interest in him to become a wood carver. That's brilliant. And now because of that, your whole family has these heirlooms carved by your grandpa. And that all comes from a connection point at the Hostfest. So whether I think that the rose mauling or the knitting, and we can joke about the knitting, but the boon hats, those sweaters, they're so cool.
Yeah, they really are nice. Yeah. And took so much time and there's so much detail in them. And they're, like you said, they're an heirloom that can be passed on. And it's just a beautiful treasure to have.
Megan, is there anything else at all that you'd like to share with us from your time or experiences at the Hostfest?
I think that's it. Yeah, I'm glad that it has continued on. And I'm so thankful that this group is coming together to look at the history of the Hostfest and really recognize those who contributed prior to it becoming the Hostfest that it is today.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. For more information on the Norsk Hostfest, please visit www.hostfest.com. This podcast was made possible by the Minot Area Community Foundation's Williamson Fund and the generous support of private donors. Thank you for listening.